It started with water. Just water hitting metal, steady, rhythmic, almost peaceful in that weird way repetitive things can calm your mind. Like you're not thinking about bills or deadlines, or how everything seems to get harder the older people around you get. You're just there, focused, present, until a voice cuts through it like a blade. Hey, shut that off. Now. And I remember freezing, not because I thought I'd done anything wrong, but because of the tone. You know that tone. The one people use when they've already decided you're guilty before you even open your mouth. I turned slowly, hose still in my hand, water splashing against the side of this old truck. A beat-up, sun-faded, dented-up workhorse that had probably seen more honest labor than most people in that neighborhood combined. Standing behind me was a woman I'd never seen before, mid-50s maybe, sharp posture, sunglasses too big for her face, holding her phone like it was a badge of authority. "You don't live here," she said, not asking, stating. I blinked. "I'm just washing." "That vehicle doesn't belong to you." And there it was. Not curiosity, not concern, control. Now let me rewind for a second because this didn't start with her. This started with Mr. Halvorsen. Though I called him Walt because he said, Mr. Halvorsen sounds like a man who still has something left to prove. And yeah, that told you everything you needed to know about him. Walt was pushing late 70s, lived alone in this small, slightly leaning house at the end of the street, the kind of place where the paint peels quietly and nobody complains because nobody really notices or cares enough to. That truck? A 2003 Chevrolet Silverado 2500. Not the kind of truck you keep for looks, the kind you keep because it carried your life when you still had the strength to carry anything at all. He told me once, sitting on his porch with that half-smile older guys get when they're remembering better days. This thing paid for everything I ever had, and everything I ever lost. Yeah, that stuck with me. Back when he could still work, that truck hauled tools, lumber, equipment, early mornings before the sun, late nights after everyone else had gone home. Then later, it became something else. Doctor visits, pharmacy runs, grocery trips when walking wasn't an option anymore. And then slowly, almost invisibly, it stopped being used and started being neglected. Not because he didn't care. That's the part people always get wrong. It's because caring started costing more than he could afford. His hands shook too much to hold anything steady. His knees gave out without warning. Money that used to go toward maintenance started going toward medication, then bills, then just surviving. So the dirt built up, layer by layer, year by year, until that truck didn't look like a memory anymore. It looked like abandonment. And that bothered me more than it should have. So one afternoon, I just showed up. No announcement, no camera, no feel-good content, nonsense. Just me, a hose, and about 2 hours I could spare. Walt tried to protest at first, said something about not being able to pay me, and I just waved it off, told him, "You already did. Just not for me." He didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded. And I started washing. Slow passes, panel by panel, watching years of dust peel away like old stories finally being told. That's when she showed up. Back to the present. The woman still standing there, arms crossed now, like she'd caught me mid-crime. "I've already called this in," she said, lifting her phone slightly. Suspicious activity. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. "Suspicious," I said, glancing at the truck, then back at her. "What part? The soap or the water?" She didn't smile. Not even close. "This neighborhood has standards." Oh, there it is. Standards. That word people use when they don't want to say control out loud. Before I could respond, I heard it. Tires rolling slowly over pavement. That distinct low hum of a patrol car easing its way into a situation it doesn't fully understand yet. And right on cue, here comes the audience. A police cruiser pulled up, lights off, which somehow made it feel more serious, like this wasn't a spectacle yet, just a quiet investigation. I shut off the water this time, not because she told me to, but because I knew how this was about to go. Walt was standing a few steps behind me now. I hadn't even noticed when he moved, but there he was, hands clasped together, shoulders slightly hunched, like he was trying to make himself smaller in his own front yard. And that right there, hit harder than anything she said. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about him feeling like even accepting help might be something he could get in trouble for. One of the officers stepped out. Younger guy, maybe early 30s, calm face, the kind that hasn't decided yet whether the world is mostly good or mostly stupid. Afternoon, he said, neutral tone, eyes scanning the scene. What's going on here? Before I could answer, she jumped in. Of course she did. I reported him. He doesn't live here. He's tampering with that vehicle, and I believe this could be theft or vandalism. Tampering. The word hung there for a second like it needed to be appreciated. I looked at the officer, then at her, then back at the officer. I'm washing a truck. The officer blinked once, slowly, like he was processing whether this was going to be a long day. Is the vehicle yours, sir? No. And you are? I gestured slightly behind me. It's his. The officer looked past me, at Walt, who straightened just a little, like he was trying to stand up for something he wasn't used to defending anymore. Yes, it's mine, Walt said, voice quiet but steady. The officer nodded, then looked back at me. And you have permission to be here? I shrugged lightly. Unless he's changed his mind in the last 10 minutes, yeah? There was a pause. One of those moments where everything could tilt either way depending on how someone decides to interpret what they're seeing. And I could feel it. That subtle shift, where something simple starts turning complicated just because someone decided it should be. The woman scoffed. This is exactly how it starts. People come in pretending to help. Next thing you know, things go missing. I tilted my head slightly. Yeah, I hear soap is a gateway crime. The officer almost smiled. Almost. But he caught himself. Because now he had to decide something bigger than whether I was washing a truck. He had to decide who to believe, or more accurately, what kind of story this situation was. And that's the thing most people don't realize. Situations like this aren't just about facts. They're about narratives. And right now, we were standing in two very different ones. All right, let me pause the story for a second because what just happened right there? That moment when she said suspicious activity and the officer had to step in. That's not random. That's actually a really common pattern, especially in neighborhoods with informal power structures or even full-blown HOA environments. According to standard procedure, when a call comes in labeled as suspicious, law enforcement isn't responding to a crime. They're responding to uncertainty. That's a big difference. It means the officer's job isn't to arrest first. It's to observe, assess, and de-escalate if possible. So right away, this wasn't about me breaking the law. It was about someone else feeling uncomfortable enough to escalate the situation. Now, from a legal perspective, what I was doing, completely fine. I had permission from the property owner. I wasn't damaging anything. I wasn't trespassing, and I wasn't conducting business without a license. No exchange of money, no advertisement, nothing that would trigger municipal restrictions. Even in stricter HOA communities, the rules usually regulate commercial activity, noise, or property appearance, not basic acts of assistance between individuals. But here's where it gets interesting. This is a psychological trap a lot of people fall into, especially in controlled neighborhoods where standards become identity. When someone sees behavior they didn't authorize or don't understand, they interpret it as a threat to order, not an act of kindness. It's not really about the truck. It's about control, about who gets to decide what's normal. And once that switch flips in someone's head, they don't see context anymore. They see a violation. That's exactly where she was operating from. And now, the officer had to navigate between perception and reality. So now we're back in it. Hose on the ground, water still dripping down the driveway in thin little streams, the kind that catch sunlight and almost make everything look calmer than it actually is. But nobody there felt calm. Not really. Because this had turned into one of those moments where something small is about to become something bigger, depending on who decides to push. The officer shifted his weight slightly, looked at me, then at Walt, then back at the woman, like he was trying to triangulate the truth between three completely different emotional states. Me, mildly irritated but holding it together. Walt, quiet, tense, almost apologetic for existing in his own front yard. And her, locked in, convinced she was the only one seeing things clearly. All right, the officer said, slow and measured. Let's just walk through this. And I remember thinking, yeah, here we go. He nodded toward me first. You said you're helping him wash the truck? Yeah. No payment involved. Nope. No business, no service, nothing like that. Just water and bad decisions, I muttered. That got a tiny exhale out of him. Not quite a laugh, but close enough to remind me he was still human under the uniform. Then he turned to Walt. Sir, Do you know this man? Walt hesitated for half a second, not because he didn't know me, but because he wasn't used to being asked questions that mattered anymore. Yes, he said finally, he's helping me. And the way he said it, careful, almost like he was afraid the answer might somehow be wrong. Yeah, that hit harder than anything else in that moment. The officer nodded again, slower this time, then glanced at the truck. Up close, it was even more obvious what was going on. You could see the clean streaks cutting through the grime where I'd already washed, sharp contrast, like two different timelines sitting on the same piece of metal. Neglect and care, side by side. He stepped closer, ran his eyes along the panel, then looked back at me. Looks like you've made some progress. Trying to, I said. Then came the pivot, because it always comes. He turned to her. Ma'am, what exactly concerned you? She didn't hesitate, not even a second. He doesn't belong here. He's interfering with property that isn't his. And I've lived here long enough to know when something isn't right. There it was again. Not evidence. Not facts. Feeling. Ownership of the narrative. The officer nodded, but this time, it was different. Less agreement, more acknowledgement. I understand your concern, he said, calm but firmer now. But based on what I'm seeing, the property owner has given permission, and there's no indication of a crime. You could almost hear the air shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to change the direction of everything. Her jaw tightened slightly. So you're just going to allow this? And I swear, the word allow carried more weight than anything else she'd said. Because again, this wasn't about a truck. It was about authority. The officer met her gaze evenly. There's nothing here that requires intervention. Clean. Simple. Final. But she wasn't done. People like that rarely are. This is how neighborhoods decline, she said, gesturing vaguely around us, like my hose was somehow the beginning of societal collapse. You let things slide, you ignore standards, and suddenly. Ma'am, the officer cut in, still polite, but sharper now. Helping a neighbor is not a violation. And that was it. That was the line. For a second, nobody moved. Not me. Not Walt. Not her. Then she exhaled sharply. That kind of controlled frustration people use when they realize they've lost, but they're not willing to admit it out loud. This isn't over, she said, more to herself than anyone else, then turned and walked off, phone still in hand like she might need it again at any moment. And just like that, the storm passed. The officer lingered for a moment, watching her go, then looked back at us. You're good, he said simply. I nodded, appreciate it. He gave a small shrug, like it wasn't a big deal, even though we both knew it could have been. Then he looked at Walt again, softer this time. Take care, sir. Walt nodded back, thank you. And there was something in his voice now that hadn't been there before, not just relief, but something closer to reassurance. Like the world hadn't completely moved on without him. The officer got back into his cruiser, engine humming quietly as he pulled away, and for a second, the street felt still, not empty, just reset. I bent down, picked up the hose, turned the water back on. The sound came back immediately, steady, familiar, grounding. Like none of that had happened. But it had. And you could see it in the way Walt stood now. He hadn't moved much, still near the same spot, but his shoulders were different, less folded in, less guarded. He watched the water hit the truck again, eyes following the clean lines as they spread wider this time, faster now that I had momentum. For a while, neither of us said anything. Didn't need to. The work spoke for itself. Layer after layer came off. Years of dust, of weather, of quiet neglect that wasn't really neglect so much as life getting heavier than a person can carry alone. And then, after a few minutes, he spoke. Didn't think anyone would bother, he said, almost casually, but not quite. I kept spraying. Yeah. Well, people surprise you. He nodded slowly. Sometimes. There was a pause. Then he added, softer. Most times, they don't. I glanced at him for a second, then back at the truck. Guess that makes this one count. He didn't respond right away. Just watched. And then, I saw it. Not a big reaction. Not dramatic. Just a small shift, the kind you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. He stood a little straighter. Just a little. Like something inside him had been adjusted, realigned. Not fixed, but acknowledged. By the time I finished the last panel, the truck didn't look new. Not even close. But it looked respected. Like it had a story again instead of just a surface. Water dripped off the edges, catching light in thin lines, and for the first time since I'd seen it, the paint actually reflected something other than dust. Walt stepped a little closer, hands still clasped, eyes moving slowly across the body of the truck. "Looks different," he said. "Yeah," I replied, shutting off the hose. "It does." But we both knew it wasn't just the truck. It was what it represented. Because for a moment there, in the middle of all that tension, all that suspicion, all that noise about standards and belonging, something simple held its ground. Not loudly, not aggressively, just firmly enough to remind everyone watching, including the ones who didn't say a word, that not everything has to be complicated to matter. And sometimes, the smallest act of help ends up exposing the biggest assumptions people carry around without even realizing it. So here's the part nobody really talks about. Not in videos, not in comment sections, not even in real conversations unless you slow things down enough to actually sit with it. Moments like this don't just reveal who people are. They reveal what people believe they're protecting. And those two things, they're not always the same. Because if you strip everything else away, the police call, the tension, the little power play in the driveway, what actually happened here was incredibly simple. One person helped another person, and a third person saw it as a threat. And yeah, that sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. But it happens all the time. The lesson here is, kindness doesn't exist in a vacuum. It operates inside systems, social systems, legal systems, neighborhood dynamics. And sometimes those systems weren't designed to recognize kindness unless it fits inside their predefined rules. And when it doesn't, it gets labeled, misunderstood, challenged. Now think about that for a second. Because from her perspective, and I'm not saying she was right, but I am saying she was consistent. She wasn't trying to be the villain. She thought she was protecting something. Standards, order, safety. The idea that her neighborhood was controlled, predictable, managed. And when something showed up that didn't go through her filter, didn't ask for approval, didn't follow whatever invisible checklist she had in her head, her brain didn't go, "Oh, that's nice." It went, "That's a problem." This is a psychological trap a lot of people never realize they're in. When control becomes comfort, anything unscripted feels like danger. So they react, not to what's actually happening, but to what they think it might lead to. And that's how you end up calling the police on a guy with a hose. Now flip that perspective. Look at Walt. Because his side of the story is quieter, but honestly, it's the one that matters more. He didn't ask for help loudly. He didn't demand anything. He didn't expect the world to adjust for him. He just adapted. Slowly, painfully. Let things go one by one as his body stopped cooperating, as money got tighter, as the space between what he used to be able to do and what he could do now got wider and wider. And somewhere in that process, the truck stopped being maintained. Not because it didn't matter, but because too many other things mattered more. Health, survival, getting through the week. So when someone steps in, not to fix everything, not to make a big show of it, but just to take one small burden off his shoulders, that moment carries weight most people don't even see. It's not about the truck. It's about dignity. It's about being seen. It's about someone looking at your situation and saying, without making a speech about it, "Hey, you're still worth the effort." And that's why what happened after the police left matters more than the confrontation itself. Because nothing dramatic happened. No applause. No viral moment. No music swelling in the background. Just water running again. And a man standing a little straighter than he was 10 minutes earlier. And if you've never experienced that kind of shift, that quiet recalibration where something small reminds you that you haven't been completely left behind, it's easy to underestimate it. But it's real, and it sticks. From a legal perspective, everything that happened that day was straightforward. Permission was given, no laws were broken, no rules were violated in any meaningful sense. The system worked the way it was supposed to. But socially, that's where it gets messy. Because the law can tell you what's allowed. It can't tell you what's right. That part, that's still on us. And here's where I want to bring it back to you. Not in a preachy way, not in a be a better person speech, just honestly. If you saw that exact situation play out on your street, no context, no explanation, just a guy washing a truck that isn't his, an older man watching from a distance, what story would your brain write? Would you assume something's off? Would you step in? Call someone? Watch from behind a curtain and wait for it to escalate? Or would you recognize what it might be? Because most of the time, we don't react to reality. We react to interpretation. And those interpretations? They're shaped by our experiences, our fears, our need for control, our assumptions about strangers, all of it. So the real question isn't what happened here. The real question is, what do you see when something doesn't fit your expectations? Do you investigate with curiosity, or do you respond with suspicion? There's no clean answer to that. No perfect moral high ground where everything is obvious and easy. But moments like this, they give you a mirror. And whether you like what you see in it or not, that part's up to you. So yeah, I'm curious. If you were in that neighborhood, standing on that street, watching that whole thing unfold, what would you have done?